Brandon Thornevale, a 19-year-old young adult, arrived at the principal's office. He saw two police officers in the room, and despite their intimidating appearance, he felt a surprising sense of relief at the sight of them. The principal told Brandon to take a seat and explain the situation he was going through to the two officers. Despite his nerves, Brandon began to speak, explaining that he had felt like he'd been stalked for over 2 months. One of the officers asked why, and Brandon explained that he kept having this terrible feeling like eyes were constantly on him. A shiver would run down his spine every time he sensed someone watching. He knew the officers wouldn't take his case seriously if he just talked about his feelings, so he shifted the focus. He began by saying it started with small things, items going missing from his dorm room. His comb, some music sheets, his phone, a pair of shoes, and even one of his shirts. At first, he brushed it off as his dorm mates playing a prank. But no matter how hard he searched, or who he asked, he never found any of his stuff. Eventually, he just assumed the bastards had thrown his things out, or sold them off somewhere. Then, a few days later, the love letters began. Brandon described them as disturbing from the very start. The tone was obsessive, unnervingly intimate. The writer claimed to be watching him constantly, detailing where he went, how he arranged his belongings, even reciting his daily schedule with eerie precision. Every line dripped with the kind of knowledge no stranger should have. Just recalling the words made a shiver crawl up Brandon's spine. He handed the letters over to the officers. They examined the handwriting in silence, their expressions unreadable. Brandon continued his explanation, describing how things had escalated. The letters had taken an even more darker turn. The writer began expressing a clear hatred for anyone who surrounded him, his friends, the girls in his music class, anyone who dared to smile at him when he played guitar or sang. One letter explicitly stated that she wished they'd all burn, just so she could be the only audience he'd ever need. It wasn't just the words that disturbed him. It was the details. The faint, lingering scent of perfume clinging to the paper suggested the writer was female. And in one of the more chilling letters, she claimed she'd wear a beautiful dress the day she finally had Brandon all to herself. The obsession had stopped being subtle. It was personal, possessive, dangerous. And if that wasn't alarming enough for the officers, Brandon went on. One morning, he woke to find deep slash marks carved into the wooden headboard of his bed. Etched between them, in uneven, furious strokes, were the words, "You are mine." Whoever was stalking him wasn't just watching. They were armed, and they had gotten terrifyingly close. As he recounted the memory, Brandon's hands unconsciously gripped the fabric of his pants, knuckles pale with unease. Then he explained how larger, more important items had begun to vanish. One of his guitars, his laptop, his wallet, several shirts, even the keys to his car. He couldn't even drive off the college campus to visit his family if he wanted to. Whoever this person was, they were getting bolder. Brandon then presented the photo evidence images of the items that had been stolen, along with a clear shot of the slashed-up headboard. One of the officers, who clearly wasn't taking the situation seriously, let out a low chuckle as he glanced at the picture. With a smirk, he said sarcastically, "Looks like you're living every guy's dream having a girl obsessed with you." The principal shot him a mild glare, and his partner elbowed him in irritation, but Brandon wasn't amused. Not even slightly. He stared back, stone-faced, as the joking officer rolled his eyes and muttered, "Look, kid, we can't really do much. You haven't been hurt, and you don't even know who this stalker is." Kid. The way he said it, condescending, dismissive, only added salt to the wound. Brandon sighed, realizing this was a waste of time. And judging by the officer's expression, the feeling was mutual. Bitterness burned in his chest. He'd come here for help, and all he got was ridicule. At least the other officer, quiet and observant, offered him a small, concerned glance. A flicker of sympathy in an otherwise indifferent room. Brandon stood up without another word and walked out of the office, not even bothering to explain anything further. His silence said more than he ever could. The principal managed to call after him, suggesting he carry something for self-defense if he planned to walk outside the college dorms. But Brandon was already gone, his frustration punctuated by the sharp slam of the office door behind him. Both the principal and the more empathetic officer shot a glare at Officer Joel, the one who'd made light of the situation. Joel only returned it with a confused, irritated look, as if he genuinely didn't understand what he'd done wrong. The other officer let out a quiet sigh, his concern for Brandon clear in his eyes. Meanwhile, Joel just waved it all off like it was nothing, his ego so inflated it left no room for empathy. It was clear to everyone else in the room, Joel's head was far too far up his own ass to care. Then 3 months had passed. It was on the 3rd month that marked the disappearance of Brandon Thornevale.